G'day, Scott here from ScottsHobbyz. Welcome to part 2 of the recycled knife build, where all the main components are going to be made out of recycled materials. So as you can see, the blade is going to be made out of an old circular saw blade that was going to be thrown out. The scales, which I made in the last video, or the block I made, is made out of bottle caps, and the pins are going to be made out of part of the handle of some old melon ballers. Check out part 1 if you want to see how I made the block that I make the scales out of and my explanation on all the different parts. I realised my 1x30 was looking a bit neglected in the corner of the shed, so I thought I'd whip it out and use it to profile the blade, chucked a new belt on, and yeah, did it pretty quick. Just a piece of advice, make sure you've got a clamp in place or the work in a vise, because as you can see there's no mark on my thumbnail. Then it decides to helicopter, and you can see I got a mark there now, and it did nick me above the thumbnail, but the thumbnail took most of the brunt, so I got kinda lucky there. And here they were just over 4mm, and I drilled a 4mm hole, so I had to file them out just a little bit to make the melon baller thing fit. Another piece of advice, if you're going to use a filing jig on small blades, use a smaller file. I've got a 12-inch file there, and it was just hard to control where it was cutting. You can see it leaves sort of big scratches above the bevel. It does that below the bevel as well. So I reckon an 8-inch file for a blade that long would be good. Also, on a blade this thin and short, the file takes off so much with each stroke. I actually intended on doing a high flat that starts about a third of the way from the top, but ended up with a full flat because I couldn't get it even quick enough without it taking off so much material. Okay, so this is after the hand sanding. Before heat treat, I've just taken it to 400, just so I don't have to get out the deep scratches afterwards. I did normalise the blade 3 times and clamped it in the vise there at the bottom of the tang so that the blade would just air cool nice and slow. Yeah, it stayed straight. That's a big difference. Alright, off to the oven. So here I place it in the oven for 2 cycles of 2 hours with a temperature of 200 degrees Celsius. Okay, heat treat's finished, and time to get all the scale off. Yay, it's getting pretty again. Just finished the hand sanding. I decided to try and take it up to 1200 grit. Never done that before, but that's what it looks like, well, when I do it. I'm not the best at it yet, but once I practice a bit more I should be better. So I've been a bit of a duffer. I actually thought that this was 2.4mm thick, which is kind of amazing because I've made another knife that's 2.2mm thick, and I remember thinking this didn't look as thick as that. But as you can see on the saw blade, if you can just make it out, it says 2.4. That's the kerf, not the thickness of the steel. The tungsten tips actually go a little bit wider than the blade, and as you can see there, it's about 1.56, 1.6 in places, but yeah, about 1.55, 1.6mm. So the bevel was done amazingly fast, but it was thinner than I thought, but that's alright because I didn't have any steel that thickness, so now I can play around with that for some other knives as well. But just thought I'd let you know, it's not actually 2.4, it's more like 1.55, 1.6. Unfortunately, I set up the camera really bad and my arm was in the way for like 97% of the cutting, so I couldn't show you that. But it cut through it like butter, it was great. Here I'm shaping the front of the scales to where I'd like it, and then I hand sand it off camera all before glue up. Alright, time for glue up. I've roughed up the insides of the scales and the tang, both with a bit of 40 grit sandpaper, so that hopefully it adheres as much as possible, because a lot of glues don't like sticking to HDPE, so hopefully it all goes alright. And I shaped the pins down just before as well. Okay. It was definitely harder to paint than brass, but it was easier than I thought, so I didn't actually leave as much pin material to paint, and then I ended up with bigger ones on one side and a bit smaller on the other, but as long as it holds, I'm happy. Alright, glue up is done. I've taken the clamps off. Because this stuff is fairly soft, I'm just going to use a 120 grit belt and not even bother with a rougher one, and there's not a heap to take off, so yeah, the pins ended up peened a bit wider on one side than the other, but they are mushroomed out on both sides, so it should add a bit of a lock. And it was very roughed up on the tang and the scales with the 40 grit bit of sandpaper, so it's going to be pretty solid, and it's not going to see any heavy use. You know, I'm not going to be splitting 6-inch wide logs with it or anything, so I'm sure it'll be fine. As you can see here, it always leaves this really annoying burr-like thing every time you sand it. Well, look at that inside radius there. No way I could have done that with the file. Much happier with that. Completely forgot I had these, so I'm actually going to use it to tune up the rest of it. Okay, so all I've done there is just radius the edges a bit just to make it more comfortable. I'm not going to do any crazy curves or contouring or anything because one, it's really thin, and two, I don't think it needs it. Yeah, now I'm going to start hand sanding. Alright, so I've just finished hand sanding the knife. I think it's come out pretty good. I had to take it all the way up to 2000 grit. There's definitely some spots where I've kind of missed or slipped, and there's some scratches where they're not supposed to be, like right in there on the ricasso. And there's a couple little marks there I couldn't get out from the cat's teeth. She ended up grabbing it. Yeah, there's the other side. Hopefully you can see that. It took a while to sand. I do not want to work with this again on a knife handle. Time for the sharpening now. Just kidding. I've got diamond stones. Alright, sharpened it up to 1200 grit on, well, 1200 grit diamond stone. Nice and sharp now, so as you can see that comes off no problem. The phone book paper. Yeah, pretty happy with that. So here it is again. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next part, which will be making the sheath. Hopefully it'll be out in a week or so. And have a good one.